Hey, welcome to Life After Nursing School. I'm your host, Caroline Dana, aka Nurse Coach Caroline, and I'm here to help you, the new nurse, thrive in your career. As a former nurse recruiter, nurse manager, and now your personal new nurse career coach, I'm obsessed with making sure you don't just survive your first couple of years at the bedside. I want you to absolutely rock them. From the challenges to the triumphs, I'll be right here with you, giving you the real-world advice and support that you need to shine. Whether you're in nursing school getting ready for life after, or you're already out there in nurse life feeling overwhelmed or even questioning your confidence, I've got your back. I'll be sharing tips, tricks, resources, and strategies that are just for you. We'll dive into everything from landing that dream nursing job to slaying imposter syndrome, and most importantly, how to keep that spark alive and stay the vibrant and amazing nurse that you are. So if you're ready to tackle the things nursing school did not cover, like how to build a career, trust yourself, and keep your passion strong, then get comfortable because we are about to dive in and make nurse life the best life. Hey, you are back for another episode. Thank you so much for being here, especially today, because today we're going to talk about boundaries. Now, when I am deciding on a topic or a guest to have on this show, I'm always channeling my past new grad nurse self and asking, what information or tools or insights do I wish I knew about when I was just beginning my nursing career? And man, oh man, do I wish I understood boundaries, not just what they are, but the impact they have, what exactly constitutes a boundary, and which boundaries would have benefited me the most. What sparked my idea for this episode was a post that I had seen on social media. And I am forgetting which nursing account this was, but this nursing account posted on Instagram a question which was something like, what is one thing that nurses with a good work-life balance do that burnt out nurses don't have time for, or think they don't have time for, or prioritize? Now, there are many things that nurses with a good work-life balance do that burnt out nurses do not do, but setting boundaries was mentioned a lot in the comment section of this post. It doesn't matter what stage of the nursing profession that you are in. Maybe you are a nurse in nursing school, or you are a new grad nurse, or maybe you are a seasoned nurse. Boundaries will make your life so much better, so please keep listening. I do want to take a moment before we dive in to ask you for a favor. If you wouldn't mind taking a moment to rate this show on whatever platform it is you are listening to this on, it helps so much. It helps the searchability of the show, which means that it can reach more nursing students and new grad nurses just like you. And in full transparency, it helps me so much. It gives me a bit of validation that this show is helping someone somewhere. That alone keeps me motivated and keeps me showing up week after week. Also, if there is a topic that you want covered on the show, just message me on social media. I can be found on Instagram or TikTok at Nurse Coach Caroline, or comment on the show directly. I'm always open to topic ideas. All right, let's dive in. So what are boundaries really? It's funny because when I hear the word boundaries, especially back when I was in my new grad nurse era in my early 20s, I immediately thought of boundaries in relation to dating. To me, it meant those personal limits that you set around what you're comfortable with, especially in a relationship, like how you communicate with someone, how fast or slow you want things to move, and how much access someone has to your time, your body, your energy, and your emotions. But as I became a self-sufficient adult in the working world, I realized that boundaries apply to much more than just intimate relationships. Boundaries are those personal limits that we set to protect our time, energy, emotions, and well-being. They help define what's acceptable and what's not in our relationships, our work, and our daily life. Think of them as the invisible lines that separate you from everything and everyone else. They allow you to show up as your best self without being overwhelmed, drained, or taken advantage of. But here's the catch when it comes to boundaries. We are the only ones who can figure out what they need to be. We have to be the ones to identify boundaries. We have to be the ones to define our boundaries. And most importantly, we need to enforce our boundaries. No one else can do that for us. And the truth is, setting and honoring your own boundaries is one of the biggest acts of self-love. When you show yourself that your limits matter, that your well-being matters, you are not just protecting your peace, you're actually becoming a stronger, more grounded version of yourself. So why do we need boundaries in our life? There are four main reasons that we need to set limits and boundaries in our life. The first and foremost is that they protect our mental health. Without boundaries, we're more likely to experience burnout, stress, and resentment, especially in a helping profession like nursing, which is why it is so crucial that we have professional boundaries in our nursing day-to-day life. Secondly, they improve our relationships. Boundaries clarify expectations and create mutual respect. They teach others how to treat us. There is little room for resentment when the people in our life understand our boundaries and respect them, and we need to be sure to do the same for the boundaries of others. But I also want to note here that it is our job to clearly communicate these boundaries with those around us. The third reason we need boundaries is because they preserve our energy. You can't pour from an empty cup. Boundaries help you conserve energy for what matters most. Okay. Again, this is very important in nursing as it is a very emotionally draining career. I recently had Ashley Small on the show, and for those of you who listened to that podcast, which is episode 13, titled Flip the Night Shift, 3 Common Mistakes Made When Living the Night Shift Life with Ashley Small, then you know she is the queen of thriving on night shift. She talks about how her entire family knows that if she worked the night before, then she will not be at family gatherings in the middle of the day the next day. They understand not to even ask her because the answer is already no. That is her time to rest, and if they want her at the function, they know to host the event later in the day or pick a new day altogether. She has clearly communicated this boundary to protect her energy, and her family respects this boundary. The boundary allows Ashley to get adequate rest without having added pressure or guilt from her family for missing midday gatherings. The last major reason we need boundaries in our life is because they support our growth. Boundaries are an act of self-respect and self-love. They allow us to prioritize our needs and goals without guilt. I've said this before, the nursing profession is hard, and working in this career day in and day out is a marathon. It is not a sprint. If you fall into the hustle culture mentality of nursing, you will find yourself in poor physical and mental health as well as burnt out. In short, boundaries aren't selfish, they're necessary. They're how we protect our peace, honor our values, and stay connected to who we are. Now, you might be thinking, okay, I get that boundaries are helpful, but do I actually need them in my life? And the answer is honestly, yes. Yes, you do. I truly believe everyone needs boundaries, and I wish that I had learned to set them a lot sooner. Let's take a second to check in with ourselves. One of the best ways to figure out where we might need boundaries is to look at where we're currently missing boundaries. We can reverse engineer this by paying attention to how we feel, because the absence of boundaries usually shows up as exhaustion, resentment, or feeling taken advantage of. The goal here isn't to wait until we're totally burnt out to make a change. I'd love to help you identify those areas now before you hit that breaking point so that you can start creating boundaries that support the version of you that you're trying to grow into. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to walk you through a few situations or signs that might mean you need boundaries, and we'll look at them across 4 different areas of life. If you hear something that feels a little too familiar, or you catch yourself thinking, yup, that's me, take that as your gentle nudge to explore that area a bit more and consider where you might need to set some limits and boundaries. The 4 areas that we're going to look at are your mental and emotional well-being, your time and energy, your relationships with others, and your work or school life. Let's break it down and see where some healthy boundaries could make a big difference for you. First, let's talk about some signs that you might be lacking boundaries in your mental and emotional well-being portion of your life. Do you find yourself feeling anxious or guilty when you say no to someone? Maybe you overthink how others will react to your decisions or feel overly responsible for their emotions and problems. If you struggle with people pleasing or constantly seek approval or validation, that's a strong sign that you might need to set some boundaries in this area to protect your peace and create emotional sustainability. Now let's shift to time and energy. Are you saying yes to things you don't actually want to do? Is your calendar full of obligations that drain you, leaving you little or no time for yourself? Maybe you rarely get a moment alone or feel wiped out after social situations. If you're often on standby for others at the expense of your own needs, that's another red flag. Boundaries around time and energy are essential to avoid burnout. Now, let's look at the next category, which is relationships. Do you tolerate disrespect just to avoid conflict or feel resentment building up but don't know how to express it? Maybe you stay in conversations or situations that make you uncomfortable, or you're afraid of being judged, disliked, or abandoned if you assert your needs. These are all signs that it might be time to set clearer limits in how you engage with others. And finally, let's take a look at work or school. Do you find yourself taking on more than your fair share just to avoid disappointing others? Maybe you're afraid to speak up for yourself or say no, or you find yourself responding to messages instantly, even during your personal time. These are strong indicators that boundaries are lacking in your professional or academic life. If any of these situations feel familiar, it's a sign that some boundary work needs to be done and could bring more balance and confidence and peace into your life. If any of these categories left you feeling seen or like someone pulled the curtain back on your life, it's okay. I think most of us can relate to this. What we need to remember is that boundaries aren't walls, they're actually bridges to healthier relationships with others and with yourself. And don't worry, there is some good news here. Boundaries can be learned and strengthened over time, and every small step counts. All right, now that we've hopefully identified some areas where boundaries might be missing in our lives, let's talk about the common mistakes people make when it comes to setting them. And don't worry, I'm going to share real life stories from my personal and professional life where I've made every one of these mistakes, just so you know you're not alone. One of the biggest and honestly most common mistakes is waiting until you're totally burned out or at your breaking point before setting a boundary. When we do that, it can catch people in our lives off guard. Suddenly, new limits are being put in place, and it can create tension or confusion, especially if we've been operating without those boundaries for a long time. And as the person setting the boundary, that can trigger feelings of guilt or self doubt, even though it's something we really needed to do. I remember this showing up in a major way when I was postpartum with my first baby. Honestly, I hadn't anticipated how the boundaries I had set before becoming a mom just wouldn't hold up at all after giving birth. I was hormonal, exhausted, and likely experiencing a bit of postpartum anxiety and still trying to meet everyone else's expectations the way that I had before becoming a mother. I kept falling into people pleasing patterns, trying to make everyone happy, and it totally backfired. I hadn't taken the time to establish clear boundaries before we had our baby, and it showed. My husband and I ended up having a lot of tough conversations about visitors who got to hold the baby and even just carving out space for the two of us. I kept trying to go with the flow until I hit a breaking point, and it wasn't until a full blown meltdown that I finally got clear on what I was and was not comfortable with. My husband and I had to sit down and really talk about our limits and how we were going to protect our peace and still make room for loved ones to be a part of this special time. Looking back, I wish we'd had those conversations much earlier, ideally before our baby was born. But the truth is, sometimes you think you'll be fine and that you can handle it all until you're in the thick of it, running on no sleep, feeling overwhelmed, and realizing that what worked before just doesn't anymore. And that's okay. Boundaries often get clearest in the moments we need them the most. Another really common mistake when it comes to setting boundaries is being too vague when we're communicating our needs. Saying something like, I need space, or that doesn't work for me, without offering any context or specifics can actually leave people confused. And when people don't fully understand what you need, it's harder for them to respect our boundaries, even if they want to. A better approach, be clear and specific. For example, instead of just saying, I need time to myself, you could say, I need at least one evening a week with no plans so I can recharge. That makes your needs tangible and it helps people understand exactly how to support you. I'll give you a real life example. In my 30s, I realized how much I depend on Sundays as a reset day. I've talked about this on the show before, but between raising three kids, running a business, working as a part time clinical instructor, and having a husband who has his own full time job and who is also in the Air Force Reserves, let's just say my life is full. And honestly, the weekdays are complete chaos. So Sundays have become sacred to me. I use them to clean, meal prep, do laundry, and actually put it away and plan for the week ahead. When I skip it, the whole week feels off. It's overwhelming and disorganized. And honestly, we all pay the price. Now, my husband, Brian, he loves to make weekend plans. He works hard all week and wants to spend that downtime doing things as a family. And I totally get that. But early on, we kept running into tension because I felt stressed when Sundays got filled with social events, and he didn't understand why. The truth is, I realized I never actually told him about my Sunday routine. He'd often been away on weekends for military drill or working on call, so I quietly built this reset habit without ever really looping him in. Once I realized that, I took a step back and explained to him why this routine mattered so much to me. And once he had the full picture, he totally got it. In fact, now he's super supportive of my Sunday reset time because he sees how it sets our whole family up for a much smoother week. But none of that would have happened if I hadn't clearly communicated what I needed and why it mattered. Another really common mistake when it comes to setting boundaries is over explaining or feeling like we need to justify them. A lot of us, especially those of us who don't want to upset anyone, tend to go into way too much detail when we are trying to set a limit. We hope that if we explain ourselves enough, the other person won't feel hurt, disappointed, or frustrated. But the truth is, we don't owe anyone a lengthy explanation to justify protecting your peace. Okay, here is a cringy example from my own life. Back when I was working as a staff nurse, management or central staffing would sometimes text me or call me last minute asking if I could pick up an extra shift. And instead of just simply saying no, I'd respond with these long, detailed replies. Something like, I'm sorry, I can't. I worked overtime last week and I'm still feeling drained. I'd rather stick to my scheduled shifts this week. Plus, I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow and some plans later on, and I just don't want to overextend myself. I'm really sorry. Reading that now makes me cringe because why was I giving all that information out? They didn't need to know every detail of my life. And what I've learned since then is that a simple response like, I'm sorry, I'm unavailable to work, is more than enough. That's it. That's the whole sentence. Over explaining doesn't make your boundary more valid. It just makes you feel like you have to defend it, but you don't. Here's your permission to understand that your time, your energy, and your well being matter, and you're allowed to protect them without offering up a long winded justification. Keep it short, keep it clear, and stand firm. I also want to add here now, this is different than clearly communicating our boundaries with people that we love the most. This is a bit different. This is when we are trying to justify them and provide reasoning behind it, which we don't need to do. Okay, let's move on to another very common boundary mistake, and that's expecting people to just know what our boundaries are without actually communicating them. This one hits close to home for me, and when we assume that others can read our minds or just get it, it almost always leads to disappointment, frustration, or even resentment. Here's the thing, boundaries have to be communicated to be respected. As the saying goes, clear is kind. If people don't know where the line is, how can we expect them not to cross it? I'm definitely guilty of this, especially in motherhood. Back when I had my first baby in December, right in the thick of viral season, I was 26 years old, totally overwhelmed, and likely dealing with a bit of postpartum anxiety. And I just assumed everyone would automatically know what was off limits when it came to interacting with a newborn in flu season. I thought it was common sense. Don't touch the baby's face, don't kiss her, and for the love of all things, please wash your hands first. But people didn't. They went straight for kisses. They grabbed her hands, touched her face without thinking twice. And I remember sitting there silently fuming, thinking, don't they know better? But the truth is, I hadn't clearly communicated my boundaries. So instead of setting the tone early, I was left scrambling to create boundaries after the fact, which made things a lot more uncomfortable and emotional. What I learned is this: being proactive and direct about your needs is so much easier than trying to clean up the emotional mess afterward. Boundaries work best when they're shared up front and clearly. So don't wait for someone to cross the line. Instead, you draw that line first. Another really common mistake I see around boundaries is setting them but not enforcing them. Honestly, a boundary without follow through is really just a suggestion. If you say, "This is my limit," and then don't stick to it, people quickly learn that you don't actually mean it. The better approach, well, that would be you respecting your own boundaries enough to uphold them, even if it feels uncomfortable or tough. I'll be honest, this one has been a struggle for me personally. When I was a new grad nurse, I tell myself, I'm not picking up any extra shifts this week, but somehow I'd end up working a double anyways. Bonus pay would catch my eye, and I'd think, well, I could really use the money. And I kept telling myself, I'm young, I can handle it. Or I'm already here for 12 hours. What's a few more hours? Plus, I still have my 4 days off. But that mindset left me completely drained, both emotionally and physically. And for those who know me from the show, you know I'm a big runner. Training for races and marathons is a huge part of my life outside of nursing, and working those extra hours started to take a toll on that too. It wasn't just about being tired, it was about losing touch with something that I loved, which impacted my overall well being and happiness. So, enforcing your boundaries isn't just about saying no to others, it's about saying yes to yourself and what you need to feel balanced and healthy. The last big mistake around boundaries that I want to talk about is feeling guilty for having boundaries at all. I especially want to call this out for my fellow people pleasers and empaths because setting boundaries can bring up so much guilt for us. You might worry that you're being mean, cold, or selfish just for saying no or putting limits in place. But here's the better way to think about it: healthy boundaries are actually acts of self respect, not selfishness. This is really real for me when I would say no to working extra shifts. I'd feel terrible for my team who had to cover the unit with fewer people, and that guilt would honestly weigh so heavily on me. I'd find it really hard to go on with my day off without thinking about how tough things probably were for my coworkers back at work. What helped me work through this was reminding myself that staffing issues are going to happen no matter what. I'm personally not responsible for fixing every single staffing shortage issue, and I can't feel guilty every time I say no to picking up extra shifts. Setting boundaries doesn't make you a bad person. It means you're respecting your limits and taking care of yourself so that you can show up as your best. I also would remind myself that I am a way better nurse and can deliver much higher quality care and also compassionate care when I am not overworked and exhausted. Saying no in the moment helped me shine during my scheduled shifts. Okay, now let's get into some real talk about boundaries. I want to share some examples, both from my own experience and ones that I've seen work very well for other nurses. Hopefully, this gets your boundary brainstorming juices flowing. Okay, one of my favorite boundaries for nurses is limiting the number of hours that you work in a pay period. For me, I quickly realized that working about 44 hours a week was my sweet spot. It gave me the best balance between pay and not getting totally wiped out. Anything over that, then I was running on empty. And some weeks I wanted to just stick with my scheduled 36-hour requirement. Another big one: putting your phone on do not disturb when you don't want management or staffing calling you to come in for extra shifts. This is especially helpful if you're someone who tends to say yes out of guilt rather than genuine desire to work. Also, I recommend not putting your work email on your personal phone. Just check your email during your shift at work when you're being paid to think about work and perform work duties. If something is truly urgent and it comes up, they will call you. Trust me. Setting clear communication boundaries is key too. Let management or staffing know the hours when it's okay for them to reach out to you. And don't be afraid to remind them if they cross those lines. This is super important if you're working night shift or shifts where you're sleeping during typical business hours. Advocating for your patient assignments can be a boundary too. For example, if you had a really challenging patient one day, it's totally fair to request not to be assigned that same patient the next day. That's actually a pretty common practice in nursing. Also, try to pick up extra shifts when the schedule first comes out, not last minute. And this is just for the people that want to work extra, okay? Planning ahead helps protect your time off and keeps you from the last minute scramble of trying to accommodate a last minute hole or work request and then leading you to burnout. And please make time for your breaks. When I was on the floor, I used to team up with a fellow nurse and I would commonly say, "Hey, do you want to cover each other's breaks today?" I usually eat lunch around 1 o'clock. And it was honestly a game changer. Almost every shift, I got my lunch in, even if sometimes it was a little later than I wanted to go, or maybe shorter in duration than I had truly hoped for. Okay, one more. Commit to leaving your shift on time whenever possible. Don't feel pressured to stay late just because others do. Do not stay unless it's a true emergency. Now, some boundaries I've personally put in place outside of work. I'd love to just share those with you so that you get an idea of how you can supplement boundaries in other areas of your life. I keep my social life pretty light. Usually just one big social commitment on the weekend, so I have time to reset and rest. I also sleep with my phone in another room so that I'm not tempted to check my business emails or get sucked into TikTok in the middle of the night. I also always try to schedule a rest day after vacations before jumping back into work or reality. It helps me reset. I set strict after dinner work hours within my business and really limit those hours so that I can protect quality time with my family. Daily reading and exercising at least 4 to 5 times a week is a non-negotiable for me. That is literally my self-care. I'm also very selective about last minute plans. I typically only say yes to plans that are last minute if they won't exhaust my kids or mess up our plans for the next day. And finally, I limit my interactions with certain people or even parts of social media or social media content that leave me feeling insecure or stuck in the comparison trap. I've learned the hard way that once I fall into these traps, it takes me a really long time to get my mindset back where it should be. So I hope me sharing some of these personal and professional boundaries help you evaluate your life and potentially implement a few for yourself. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this deep dive on boundaries. I hope you're feeling empowered to start recognizing where you might need to set limits in your own life. Remember, boundaries aren't about shutting people out or being selfish. They're essential tools to protect your mental health, preserve your energy, improve your relationships, and help you grow both personally and professionally. Whether you're a nursing student, a new grad, or a seasoned nurse, setting and enforcing boundaries is one of the best acts of self-love that you can practice. It's how you protect your peace, maintain your passion, and show up as the best version of yourself for your patients and your loved ones. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love it if you could share it with a friend who might need to hear it too. And please take a moment to rate and review the show wherever you're listening. It really helps the podcast reach more nurses just like you who are navigating the challenges of this rewarding but demanding profession. Your support means the world to me and keeps me motivated to bring you more content that supports your nursing journey. Thanks again for being here, and until next time, keep setting those boundaries, taking care of you, and as always, I have one hand for me and the other for you. Signing off. Well, that's it for today's episode of Life After Nursing School. I hope you feel more confident and ready to tackle the challenges that come with starting your nursing career. Remember, the first year or two might not be easy, but with the right mindset, you can overcome anything. If you found value in today's episode, I'd love for you to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a future episode. Also, please consider leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform. It helps so much in reaching other new nurses like you. Thanks for listening, and remember, you've got this. Take care and see you next time.